Today we are going to learn about loops. In this video, we'll cover the 3 types of loops, their structure, the steps taken while executing them, and finally we will go over an example. We will also do the same for nested loops. There are 3 types of loops: for, while, and do while. Loops are used to repeat a set of actions a number of times or until a condition is met. An example of when you would use loops in FTC is to repeat your code while the op mode is active. If you are sure on how many times you want your code to run, a for loop works the best. To write a for loop, first you will initialize your variable, and in the example that is int counter equals 0. Next comes the condition, counter is less than 5, and finally you will update your variable, counter plus plus. Inside the curly braces will be the code you want to repeat. This example code will output for loops, for loops, for loops, for loops, for loops. First, the initialization step occurs, and this happens only once, and that is int counter equals 0. Next, the condition is evaluated, and since 0 is less than 5, for loops will print. Then counter updates to 1, and since 1 is less than 5, for loops will print another time. Counter is then updated to 2, and the condition is checked again. Since 2 is less than 5, for loops will print another time. Counter is then updated to 3, and the condition is checked another time. Since 3 is less than 5, for loops will print another time. Counter is then updated to 4, and since 4 is less than 5, for loops will print another time. Counter then updates to 5. However, this time, 5 is not less than 5, so the loop will stop. For loops normally have 3 expressions, but they will also work with only 1 or 2 expressions. An expression is a step, for example, the initialization step, the condition, or updating the variable. If you add only 1 or 2 expressions in a for loop, you have to be careful not to make an infinity loop. This is an example of an infinity loop. It will never end because counter will never be less than 0. In the first iteration, counter will be 0, and that will pass. The next iteration, counter will equal 1. And as you can see, this condition will always be true. However, the example on the left is not an infinity loop because counter will, at one point, not be less than 5. If you are not sure on how many times you want your code to run, a while loop works the best. In the parentheses comes the condition, and in this example, it is op mode is active. First, the condition is checked, and if it is true, the loop will execute. If the op mode is active, the robot will go backwards and turn right, and this will continue until the op mode is not active, meaning the round has ended. You use do-while loops if you want a piece of your code to run once before the condition is checked. First comes the do part of the code, and afterward is the condition. This example code will output do-while loops. First, the do part of the loop will run, and this will occur even if the condition is not true, because the condition isn't checked yet. If counter starts at 0, the program will print do-while loops. But since 0 is not greater than 5, the rest of the loop will not execute. In all the other types of loops we learned, if the condition is false, the code inside the loop will not execute even once. However, since this code is inside a do-while loop, it will run once even though the condition is not true. If you want the inner loop to repeat multiple times based on the conditions of the outer loops, you will use nested loops. The structure of a nested loop is as follows. First will be the outside loop, and inside it will be the inside loop. The example to the right is a nested for loops, and it will output nested for loops, nested for loops, nested for loops, nested for loops. First, the condition of the outer loop is checked, and if it is true, the next steps will follow. And in this example, since counter 1 starts at 0, and 0 is less than 2, the inner loop will execute. And counter 2 starts at 0, and since 0 is less than 2, nested for loops will print 1 time. Then, counter 2 will update to 1, and since 1 is also less than 2, nested for loops will print another time. Counter 2 then updates to 2, and since 2 is not less than 2, the inside loop will finish and the outside loop will update. So counter 1 will become 1. And since 1 is less than 2, the inside loop will execute again. Counter 2 starts at 0 again, and since 0 is less than 2, nested for loops will print another time. Counter 2 will then update to 1, and since 1 is less than 2, nested for loops will print another time. Counter 2 will then update to 2, but this time 2 is not less than 2, so that the inside loop will stop executing and the outside loop will update again. Counter 1 will then become 2, but now 2 is not less than 2, so this nested for loop will end. Nested loops are loops within loops. In nested loops, the outside and inside loop do not have to be the same type. In the previous example, the outside and inside loop were both for loops, but it will also work if the inner loop is a for loop and the outer loop is a while loop. And this is an example of a for loop nested inside a while loop. Nested loops are composed of inner loops and outer loops. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys liked this video. Remember to like and subscribe.